Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny, joined with Kenny Squared. This is the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast where we have conversations at the intersection of sports and faith. We've got a lot of baseball, a little bit of football today. The Mets traded their closer, but I got my Mets shirt on. I'm still optimistic, Kenny. Am I nuts?
Um, Wait until we see what happens with Justin Verlander.
Okay, all right. And the Yankees, what are they going to be doing? Are they going to be sell or buy?
I don't know. I'll get more into it. I have a couple thoughts, but man,
Okay. All right. And I don't know, man. I call that you were starting to tinker a little bit last week, lean a little bit more. But I said that I couldn't see the Angels trading Ohtani, and looks like they're now trying to put a couple of more players around and make a run here.
which is great, but this means that they have to do something very important, which we can talk about today.
Okay. All right. And are you glad Saquon is at camp now?
Yes, it's such a huge relief.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, we're going to talk about all that. You ready to get this going?
Yeah, let's get going.
All right.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny and
Kenny Squared.
with the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. And Kenny, I tell you, I turned to the Met game. They make a little bit of a run. It's 1-0. It was a great pitching duel. Kodai Senga has just pitched great. He's just been kind of under the radar here this year. He pitches great. He only gives up the 1 run last night. And Josiah Gray pitches great for the Nationals. The Mets tie it up. The bases are loaded. And they put the tarp on the field, and it hadn't rained yet. And so they went to commercial, came back, and Gary Cohen and Ron Darling were a little confused. But they said that they must have something in the forecast. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, the skies just opened up. And at this point, it's after 10 o'clock. They were delayed for an hour and a half. So I didn't wait up. But I wake up to two things. One, the Mets won. Mark Canha, who was going to be up next, hits a sacrifice fly, and the Mets win 2-1. But Brooks Raley came in to close the game because they had just traded their closer while they were in that rain delay, David Robertson, who was great this year, by the way. Let me not say great. He was very, very, very good. Every time they called on him, and he didn't have as many saves because there were a lot of times they brought him in the 7th inning or 8th inning to face, the best hitters. So is this the first domino falling for the Mets? I don't know. They play the Nats and they play the Royals over these next 7-8 games. I think it's a 4-game series here. The Nats, then they play the Royals for 3 games. They're still 7.5 back. I didn't check this morning if they gained anything with the win last night. They did. I want to get your opinion first. You're very familiar with David Robertson. He's been very underrated for a long time. Obviously had some excellent years with the Yankees. The impossible position of being the closer after Mariano Rivera, but he did it, and he did it well. What are you seeing here with the Mets? What are you thinking?
I'll start with this because this seems kind of odd. Like, I know this is more of a football thing, but it's still a thing. Like, trading in a division is always, to me, kind of bizarre, especially when you're talking about a team that you are kind of chasing for the wild card.
Yeah.
And the Marlins. I think that is a little bizarre. Because, like, usually, let's say, if you're talking the Mets, you want to trade to, like, I don't know, Minnesota,
Right.
Toronto, someone that's not in your division, usually also out of your league. I think, like, I won't say it's a full-blown sell because relief pitchers are kind of tend to be a little bit interchangeable. Um, but also, like, you're talking about your best relief pitcher, and there's still the rumblings of Justin Verlander could be on the move. I think if Justin Verlander's traded, then put a fork in it, the Mets are done this year. But also, it's weird because, like Verlander still does have another year, but if you get in, like, a pretty decent package, because it seems like everybody wants starting pitching this year. If you get a pretty decent return, then it might be worth it. And you could go for, let's say, a Blake Snell in the off season, get a little bit younger at the starting pitching position, and also add a lefty. So it's all interesting. I do think, though, at this point, the Mets might be like, it's really hard because what are they? 6 below 500.
Yeah.
7 out of the last wild card. It's an uphill battle, but also it's not impossible. Like, we've seen bigger deficits overcome. I think one of the biggest things, though, is they got 1, 2, 3, 4 teams ahead of them in order to leapfrog them. Like, Yankees have played decently the last, like, week and a half, but yet they still are in last place because the Red Sox have had the best record in July. So, like, that's one of the biggest things with the Mets is, I don't know, like, they still have to overcome so much just to get to the point where they can, like, first you got to get to 500, and there's no guarantee of that. And
Right.
then you have to leapfrog 4 other teams. So they might be just saying, it's not happening this year. Let's see what we can get.
Well,
also, it's not like they got a ton back for Robert.
No, they got 2 prospects, and let me talk about that for a second. I agreed with everything you said. I do think if Justin Verlander is traded, and I don't think he will be. I don't think him or Scherzer are going to go anywhere. I think that because they have no trades and because of their salaries next year. So I just don't think that there's teams out there that want to inherit $40 million next year. Now, there are teams, obviously, that can afford that. The Dodgers come to mind, and probably a couple of other teams, but I'm not sure that if the asking price is high, then again, they might pay the asking price because they're not rentals, right? You would probably have them next year. But my gut is telling me, like it was with Shohei, that the Mets may now deal off Tommy Pham, which I would hate to see him go. He's been really, really good this year. Mark Canha is a really good player overall, just an excellent overall player. He's been a little bit off with the bat this year. I think those are the 2 main guys that you would probably now see get peeled off. I don't see any of the core guys going, the Jeff McNeils or anybody like that. He also has now a long-term contract too. They're definitely not going to trade any of the younger guys either. It wouldn't matter on the salary anyway. 2017, you mentioned full blowout. And this is why I'm not crazy about these deadline deals, because it's very rare that they really do pan out. I mean, you do sometimes have to go back and say, okay, wow, that prospect was this person, as an example, R.A. Dickey being traded for Noah Syndergaard and Travis d'Arnaud, and so every once in a while it does pan out, but let me give you 2017. Only one short year where things fell apart for the Mets that year. One short year after they were in the playoffs. They were in the playoffs in 2016. They lost to the Dodgers. At the deadline, they dealt Lucas Duda to Tampa. Neil Walker, I'm forgetting, did he go to the Yankees? Forgot where he went. He might have went to the Yankees, or he might have went to another contender, maybe the Dodgers or Giants. I don't remember where he went. Jay Bruce, though, they dealt, and he went to Cleveland. Curtis Granderson, they dealt, and I know he went to the Dodgers. Their closer was a guy you may remember named Addison Reed, and he went to the Red Sox. And maybe this is 2018. It's not 2017. It's 2018, I believe.
You're right, 2017.
It's 2017. Okay.
Neil Walker went to Milwaukee.
He went to Milwaukee, right. Okay. Do you want to know the one prospect out of all of the prospects they got that made it to the major leagues and is made a good impact last year? This year he's been off is Drew Smith. He's the only prospect out of all those guys. So I named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 established major leaguers at that time, right? Lucas Duda had come off hitting 30 home runs, 32 home runs, I believe. Neil Walker had some really good years with the Pirates and a good year and change with the Mets. Jay Bruce was an established slugger. Curtis Granderson, had some great years with the Yankees, with Detroit. And Addison Reed was a really good pitcher, and the Mets made him the closer. Somebody got hurt. I forgot who, and he inherited the closer. And I think at the time the Mets traded him, he had 19 saves. So I just, if they go into, and listen, I don't think those executives look at history. They always think that every prospect they're going to get is going to work out. And we just see so many times that it doesn't. It's usually rare that prospect really works out. And so I don't think, nor do I think they should. I'm going 50 summers ago to the 1973 Mets. And listen, I would be rooting for the Mets anyway, right? Whether they lose these next 10 games or not, we're both fans, right? You're a fan of the Yankees. We'd still be watching the game. We'd still be rooting them on. But where I think, and it's different, right? Because the NL East was different then. The Braves were in the NL East at that time. But 1973, what had happened most of that year, Kenny, Yogi Berra, was the Mets manager. And there were calls, hey, get rid of him, because he took over when Gil Hodges passed away in 72, in spring training in 72. And but the Mets had a lot of veterans that year that had spent a lot of the season hurt. Cleon Jones, Rusty Staub, we talked about him last week, Wayne Garrett. There was several that were hurt. John Milner was having a really good year. He wound up with 23 homers, 72 RBIs. But it wasn't until like August where things really clicked. They went into August 43 and 53, 10 games under 500. And they made quite the historic run. They finished at 82 and 80 or 81 and 80, 82 and 80. I think it was 81 and 80 because I think I think the last game of the season got rained out. And since they had clinched it, they didn't play it. They won 19 out of 27 games in September. So they went on quite the run. Everything fell in place. They got healthy all at once. They started hitting all at once. Tom Seaver was Tom Seaver. John Matlack went on quite a run. It was funny. He wound up 14 and 16, but he had a 3.20 ERA, and he led the National League in strikeouts, if I remember. Or he had 205 strikeouts. I'm not sure if that led the National League or not. But Tug McGraw went on a run. He had 25 saves, and I want to say that 20 of them were like after August. And he was the one who coined the phrase, you got to believe, because the GM went into the clubhouse and was just reaming them out. And McGraw tries to, make light of it and says, come on, guys, you got to believe. You got to believe. Anyway, it can happen. In this now wild card thing, though, it's hard because that year the Mets also had to jump over a lot of teams. They were in last place. But all those teams fell off of the map. The Cubs, the Expos, all of the teams that were in the East at that time. The Cubs and the Braves were also in the East. The Cardinals, all of them just started losing, So it all lined up for the Mets. And they took the Oakland A's to 7 games in the World Series that year. They beat the Reds in a big upset in the championship series. So there's hope. This is a veteran team. And one last thing I'll say real quick, and then I want to get to the Yankees. So I don't know if they're going to sell off or not, but the thing about people are saying, hey, this is, in comparison to the 91, 92 teams, the Bobby Bonilla, Eddie Murray, Brett Saberhagen teams. There's a big difference, I think, in those teams. Jeff Torborg was the manager. Those teams were unlikable. Like, it was hard to root for Bobby Bonilla. I was one of the few guys that said, listen, this guy's a slugger, man. He's going to come through. And his second and third years with the Mets were actually really good. they peeled him off at the trade deadline the next year to Baltimore. And Alex Ochoa never panned out. He was a big prospect and a number one prospect actually in baseball at the time, and he never panned out. He was who Bobby Bonilla was traded for. They dealt, I think, Saberhagen over to Boston, and he had a couple of really good years with the Red Sox. But Eddie Murray stayed. They were just very unlikable. Vince Coleman, throwing firecrackers at fans. I mean, it was, Brett Saberhagen spraying bleach on reporters, Bobby Bonilla inviting reporters to fight, to step outside and let's go ahead and brawl, putting earplugs in because he didn't want to hear the fans boo. That team was an absolute disaster. With the Mets now, yes, high payroll, but these are very likable players. There's no one that doesn't like Pete Alonso, and we know he's playing hard. I think there's some fans that might not like Lindor that much, but for the most part, he's very likable. And we see that he's playing hard. Jeff McNeil, having a tough year, playing extremely hard all the time. Brandon Nimmo, these are very likable guys who it just hasn't worked out for them this year. Now you could say Verlander and Scherzer. I think Verlander is winning over the fans because he's pitching great. Scherzer, not so much. He gets booed pretty quickly, because I think people look at him a little bit more as a hired gun since he's kind of bounced around a little bit, like he went to the Dodgers that year. So that's the big difference to me in the early 90s teams as opposed to this team. It may not work out. I said that last week. Doesn't feel like right now that this is a team that's going to go on a run. They've just been way too inconsistent. There's still a lot of baseball left, and so I'm going to hold on to 1973. Yeah. Taking me back to when I was 13 years old. And when I couldn't believe my eyes, they were like winning every day, it seemed like. And other teams were losing every day. And before you know it, they were in first place. Before you know it, they were in the playoffs that year. And then, you blink and they were in the World Series. This could happen with this team. I would say it's about a 70-30 chance, 70% not, 30% maybe, but there's a lot of teams to jump over. Before we get to the Yankees, I don't know if you had anything to comment on what I said.
Well, I was looking here at a few different, just like big trades that were made, and yeah, usually it really doesn't, like trading this dude for prospects. A lot of times, usually the prospects don't pan out. Like you had said, 2017. I'd look back at the 2016 year for the Yankees. Obviously, like they're retooling. They kind of let the young guys of Aaron Judge and Gary Sanchez play.
Yeah.
And they traded obviously Chapman and Andrew Miller. A lot of those guys didn't pan out. The only one really, and not really that surprised, I think he was like a top 5 prospect at the time, was Gleyber Torres.
Yeah.
Gleyber Torres, they got Billy McKinney, who's still, he wasn't with the team, and now he's back with the team.
Back with them, yeah.
He hasn't been that great.
Yeah.
And like for Andrew Miller, they got Clint Frazier, who never worked out.
Yeah.
Ben Heller, who was supposed to be a decent reliever, he never worked out. Justice Sheffield, who, I mean, they traded for Paxton, who's pretty good, but that still didn't really work out. Like, it's hard. And basically, a lot of times, unless you get like a bona fide prospect, like say when Gleyber Torres was coming up, or like if you're talking Yankees now, a guy like Jason Dominguez or Everson Pereira, like, or if you're talking the Mets the last couple of years, a guy like Francisco Alvarez, like usually it's going to be kind of a, maybe this guy can pan out, and they'll be like, oh, remember when we traded this guy?
Yeah.
It's like, let's go back to the example when Bartolo Colon was traded for Brandon Phillips and Cliff Lee. Like, it doesn't usually happen.
Yeah. It just doesn't. And so many names are going through my. We could talk about Alex Escobar, for Roberto Alomar, and that didn't work out either way. Lastings Millage never really panned out as a top prospect. Dominic Smith was a big process. At least Dominic Smith is a major leaguer, right? He's playing every day. And if you get that, that's fine. Not everybody's going to be a star that comes up. it's hard, man. It's a really, really baseball more than football and basketball, I think. You and I have a lot of great discussions in basketball more than football, probably, of great college players that don't work out in the NBA. And I don't say usually because it doesn't happen as often. We've seen over the last years, the great college player, typically now becoming a great NBA player. And I think part of that is because, of the one and done and then they have a few years at least to develop. But we've seen over the years, college players of the year that, just don't so much pan out. And, Adam Morrison and players like that just don't pan out in the NBA. You every once in a while see the number one pick in the NFL, not pan out. But baseball, man, I mean, it is just the oddest thing to me that some of these guys will be top prospects and they just, they might be a quick flash in the pan, but they can't adjust to major league pitching. And then there's the expression, and they're starting to say this a little bit about Mark Vientos. Hopefully it won't be the case of a quadruple A player, right? That is excellent at triple A, but just can't do it in the major league level. The Mets had a first baseman like that. You and I went, was it you and I or me and Larice went to like one of the last games of the season, the Mets, and I think they were the Expos were still the Expos, so it's a while ago. And he looked like Manny Ramirez, and he had the same batting stance, and Manny Ramirez was his idol. And his name is escaping me, and the Mets wound up trading him to Texas. But he hit like 2 home runs in that last weekend. And you thought, the next year this guy was going to be a big prospect, and he never panned out in the major leagues. There's been a lot of players like that. Butch Husky was another, that just never really, he had some flashes, but never really panned out. Anyway, we're going a little bit off the track here. I just, it's hard. These deadline deals are hard. Typically, you don't get major league talent back. Typically, you're peeling off these guys for prospects, and it just, you don't get anything in return. Go ahead.
I got one that I didn't realize was one. 2017, your boy Jose Quintana traded from the White Sox to the Cubs.
Yeah.
White Sox got back in return Eloy Jimenez, was he an All-Star this year? He might have been, and also Dylan Cease.
Yeah, see, there's one that really turned out great, But now, believe it or not, the White Sox may trade both those guys. So before we go to the Yankees, there's been a few other small trades happening here and there. The, Angels, now fortifying themselves. Let's talk about Shohei for a second. And what have you seen happen so far with a few of these teams? And what do you think is going to happen with a few of them, the White Sox being one? White Sox have a lot of talent that, they dealt Giolito the other day. Let's start with the Angels first and the decision to hold on to Shohei. And your text to me was now they got to keep him. What do you think about the Angels here?
I like the Angels actually getting a good starting pitcher that's not named Shohei Ohtani. I think that's good.
Yeah.
And yeah, at this point, like, I love the idea of just going on a playoff run, and it seems like already Ohtani might end up taking things to the next level. I don't know if you saw his game yesterday, complete game shutout, and then hits a home run in game 2 of a doubleheader.
He had 2 home runs, right? He had 2 home runs, yes. I mean, it's just, I don't have words for him, man. A complete game, which is rare these days, and he hits 2 home runs. But go ahead.
But I mean, at this point, like, because I totally am for go all in, make a playoff run. But at this point, you have to re-sign him.
Yeah, I agree.
Because because I mean, still, are the Angels even the best team in that division? Probably not. Now, if you were to get like another starting pitcher or get like a big bat in that lineup, no, you're cooking. But and also, I mean, Mike Trout is going to be coming back soon.
Yeah.
So let's say they do go on a playoff run, make it to the DS or the CS. Like, that might be enough for Ohtani to stay anyway. And it seems like, according to some reports, that he's like really comfortable with the Angels and wants to come back,
Yeah.
got to re-sign him.
Yeah.
The
No
Angels
doubt.
will never.
No doubt.
Angels, like if I were an Angel fan and like Ohtani ends up going to the Dodgers or the Yankees or I don't know, random team like the Texas Rangers or something like that, and like you get nothing for him aside from like a compensatory draft pick, like that would be devastating.
It will. They need to lock him up early. Can I make one quick prediction and then I want you to keep going? If the Angels make the postseason, games in Anaheim that was supposed to start at like 10 o'clock, playoff games or later, or 9:30 or something like that, I guarantee you MLB, ESPN, whoever will move those games to make them early, and they should, because we're gonna want to see him and Trout finally in the postseason. They will move those games. There's no way those games will be on late in Anaheim. People are gonna have to be rushing from work to go catch those out on the West Coast, But go ahead.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing, like just the marketability of it,
Hell yeah.
And yeah, like, and I think one of the other things, because I still think like if I were the Angels, I would have been like, hey, we could get a haul for you and then still re-sign you if you want to have like a 2-month trip out to New York or up the coast to Los Angeles or something.
Yeah.
But it would be because we still want to see, like, I think the baseball world wants to see Shohei Ohtani in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I think something like, especially now that he continues to become the biggest player in the sport, I think it's something that everyone really wants to see. Angels probably still need another piece, relief pitcher. But either way, I think it'll be very interesting to see, especially these next couple of days to see what happens.
Yeah. No, I agree. You sent me something about the Dodgers now being in on or Nolan Arenado would approve a trade to the Dodgers, and the Dodgers having a lot of interest. Oh my gosh. Dodgers getting Nolan Arenado. That should scare our friend Mike and the Braves. The Braves are clearly the best team in the National League, if not the best team in baseball. That doesn't mean they're going to win the World Series as we've seen these last few years. But I would, oh my gosh, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, with the Dodgers, I don't know. Imagine a team with Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and Nolan Arenado as the middle of your order. Good luck.
Gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Just absolutely good luck.
Yeah.
But I think I don't know. Because it looks like Arenado, he said he would only approve a trade to the Dodgers, which, like, in baseball, you don't really see a lot of players like demanding trades to certain places like the NBA.
Right.
But baseball players typically have a lot more power, not just because of the 10-5 rule, which like sometimes really goes into effect, but also a lot of players just have no trade clauses in their contract. Justin Verlander's one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also Nolan Arenado.
Yeah.
I mean, if the Dodgers get him, I mean, they become the favorite again. Their pitching still is a little suspect.
They're gonna get us. They're gonna get a starter from somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like adding, because also, I mean, bizarre trade, but acquiring Ahmed Rosario from the Guardians for Noah Syndergaard.
Right.
They haven't had like an actual shortstop pretty much all year. They've been kind of shifting people around and stuff. They have that, add in like arguably the best third baseman in the league, along with Freddie Freeman, who's a perennial MVP candidate.
Having another great year. Yeah, he's having another great year. And so is Mookie Betts. Wow.
Yeah.
That
so like
scary.
And also I think Arenado, like with a new because St. Louis has been weird. They've had an awful year, but like him getting kind of rejuvenated and actually being in like a hardcore playoff run, be
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, Ken. If I'm the Cardinals, I'm not trading him. You know what I mean? It's not like the Cardinals will be bad again next year. I couldn't see that. I'm not trading it. I mean it. Listen, it may be too tempting because I'm sure the Dodgers have a lot of great prospects as they always do, but we already just had the prospects discussion. But it might be just too tempting. And you can tell Arenado really doesn't want to leave there. It's not like he's unhappy in St. Louis. Um, and listen, it's like almost like the Mets. If it's just a bad year, it's just a bad year. The Cardinals will be back next year. I'm not. If I'm the Cardinals, I'm not trading him or Goldschmidt. But you just never
Yeah.
know. You never know. Anything else strike you before we get to the Yankees across the majors? Any other teams you think are gonna?
Um, I just want to say I want to see two teams make a little bit of a splash here.
Right.
One, I don't, but I still do. Um, but that's the Baltimore Orioles.
Oh,
Like
boy.
it would be as a Yankee fan chasing like they play the Orioles this week, so please don't do anything until after Sunday.
Yeah.
But like I think it would be really fun to see the Orioles like make a move for a big player. I think that would be a very exciting thing for baseball, a team that's been bad for the last few years.
Yeah.
Kind of had their rise to fame last year and then like making a big splash. I think that would be really fun to see. Another team would be the Arizona Diamondbacks. Because especially like they've kind of teetered off a little bit. They're half game out of the last wild card spot, 4 games out of the division. Like seeing them also make kind of a big splash would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I don't know what either of those teams would look like right now as far as like what the move would be. But I think it would be fun. I want to see them kind of not just so that you have like I don't want Houston to go out and get someone that's like say like a Dylan Cease or whoever.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to see the same teams getting like the big time players. I would like to see another team.
Yeah. It's so interesting you bring up those two teams. I'll say this real quick. And how baseball changes like over years, how teams can go from. There was a time where the Diamondbacks and the Orioles were considered big market teams. And then all of a sudden they couldn't afford to keep their players. The Orioles used to sign guys left and right, whether it was, Rafael Palmeiro or, whomever. And I remember when the Diamondbacks signed Randy Johnson and got Kurt Schilling. And, that wasn't that long ago. Now these are like considered small market teams and they had to build a different way. Both these teams have a core of excellent young players. And you hate to see them get into the position in a few years like the Kansas City Royals are, that they just don't have a plan to keep these guys or replace them. Because that's why the Royals are so bad. They lost all their guys in one shot, and they didn't have any sort of plan. And, to your point about losing Shohei, they lost these guys to free agency. They didn't try to peel them off and try to get something for them, whether it was Eric Hosmer, Lorenzo Cain, and these guys have dropped off now at this point. Mustaka, I forgot who he's with, but I know he's still playing. I don't know if Hosmer is with anybody or Cain is with anybody, but I'm just naming those 3 guys. There's other guys on that team too, on those teams that went to the World Series 2 straight years. So the Diamondbacks and Orioles, I think, have to really be careful and maybe I agree with you. They should get a piece or two, but also they really in the offseason need to focus on signing their young core players long term before they hit free agency. Otherwise they'll be right back in the same position. They worked hard. They've rebuilt the right way. And I love when I see that. But these teams all of a sudden became small market teams. And you like to see them now hold on to this core of young players. Both these teams are very similar. Orioles obviously playing much better. Orioles now have the best record, right? In the American League?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And ESPN, listen, they were on Sunday Night Baseball. We finally see them on the national stage here. I know it's against your Yankees, but that should be an interesting. Listen, this is the most important. Let's shift to the Yankees now. This is the most important series of the year for them. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even I don't know if it was Cashman or Hal, one of the two, said like whether or not they're gonna hardcore buy is kind of based on how they do this weekend.
Yeah.
I think number one, I think like you look at a guy like Cody Bellinger. He's been kind of the one that like, oh, the Yankees should get him. The Yankees should get him. He makes a lot of sense. He's not a ton of risk, and you probably don't have to give up like a huge prospect for him.
Yeah, he's a rental. Yeah.
So I think that that's the move that they should make. I don't think they're going to make a huge splash. I could be wrong. I mean, if they sweep the Orioles, we could be looking at like maybe they'll actually go out and get somebody else. But I think one of their biggest things is they're looking at some of the guys that they're going to be getting back. Nestor Cortez is doing rehab starts. He's on the 60 days, so he's not eligible until I believe next week.
Okay.
But he's expected to come back soon. Jonathan Loaizaga is going to be joining the team again in August. And obviously Aaron Judge is coming back either today, tomorrow, sometime this weekend.
Yeah.
Probably tonight, but we'll see. So like with all that said, I think the Yankees might see, because I mean this happens I feel like a lot. Their trade deadline is more getting injured players back in the lineup that can help replace like the Billy McKinneys, the Willie Calhouns, guys like that. So that'll be interesting. And I don't think they're gonna sell. I think even if they start to go back in the tank, there really isn't a ton of guys that like have a ton of value. I mean, we talked about that last week a little bit. Gleyber Torres is one. I don't know if they'll trade him. Wandy Peralta, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're gonna get a ton back for him. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Gleyber, I think would be the guy that, because he's a rental, right? He's a free agent at the end of the year.
Yeah,
so he would probably be the guy that that teams will want. But I scratch my head with it. I've defended him for the last couple of years, and I scratch my head with him. He just hasn't fulfilled that potential that I certainly thought that he had, and I know you thought that he had as well. I'm just I don't think the Yankees should sell at all. I think how many games are the Yankees 2.5 back?
Yeah, 2.5 back.
Okay. So that's close, man. That's closer than the 7 games that the Mets are out. So I'm not sure I'm selling at 2.5 back of the wild card. I'm patiently waiting for these guys to come back. I'm just hoping that the veterans and you saw some signs in this last week that Rizzo's coming along. I was stunned at because I didn't know Giancarlo's actual numbers. I mean, 13 homers, 30 something RBIs this late in the season. I was stunned at that. I'm sure you've been as well, right?
Oh yeah. He's been like, I don't know if he's been hurt, but he has been awful. Like he has a negative WAR, which like
that's hard
means
to do.
That a replacement player is better than him this year. So
yeah, that's hard to do. So I think, listen, I think there's a lot to look forward to with the Yankees. I really do. I told you that the other day, and when the Mets were beating up on them 9-3, and I didn't get too excited on the one game there, but I do think that the Yankees are going to turn it around. I think you're going to see a big, my prediction, I think you're going to see a big August, from the Yankees. I think if I'm Aaron Boone, man, I'm standing down, not every day, but I'm playing somebody else when Judge comes back. And hopefully, I pick up another bat. We said all along from the beginning of the year, the Yankees need another bat in that line. I don't know who that would be at this point. There was some talk of Adam Duvall, right? But I don't think he wants to leave Boston. Talk about the Braves getting him back or him going to the Dodgers. Seems like he's become a hired gun as well, right? At this point in his career. And I think he would do well with the Yankees as well. He seems like he hits anywhere he goes, but I don't know who that would be at this point, in the season that might be available for the Yankees. They'd have to probably take a bad contract, from somebody, which the Yankees have been known to do. But I just think that with the guys coming back, with their pitching the way it is, Garrett Cole, and that bullpen, by the way, looked great the other night. Actually both nights with the Mets. The first night, not so much. That was more on the starter, though. But their bullpen is still solid. So I think their bullpen could get them to the postseason. I really do. I see the Yankees. Listen, there's some tough teams, right? They're chasing Toronto and a few others. There's some tough teams that they're chasing, but I think they'll make a run. I know you're skeptical, but I really think they're going to make a big run here. All right, what else do we got in baseball?
I mean, we touched on a lot of the trade deadline stuff. I
Yeah.
think we're pretty good.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think so. It's gonna be. We'll probably have more to talk about next week after the deadline, right? Because the deadline is what, on Tuesday? Yes, 31st
Yeah.
is Tuesday. Yeah. So there'll probably be a flurry of things. Be interesting to see what some of these teams on the periphery will do. Yeah, that Texas Houston series got a little chippy. You know, it's good to see some of these rivalries. You know, not that anybody wants to see a all out brawl, but you know, some of these they were getting beat up pretty good, the Astros, and you know, Marcus. Yeah. Marcus Semien, though, not like him to be staring down the pitcher as he hits a home run, but he had gotten dusted back, you know, before, and then Garcia hits the grand slam, and you know, Maldonado, veteran catcher, he's like, "Come on, man, what are you doing?" You know. So anyway, all right, let's talk real quick about the whole Bronny James thing, man. That was scary, and there's no video, thank goodness, that has surfaced of that. You know, he goes into cardiac arrest, man, 18 years old. And I you know, I think of a lot of things. You know, I'm old enough to remember Reggie Lewis, you know, passing away after that happened the second time. Hank Gathers the second time as well. And I think the reason why I bring up those two is because they're both of them. It happened the first time and they recovered. You know, now they weren't this young. Maybe Hank Gathers was a year or two older. He's a college player, Loyola Marymount. But Bronny James, what thoughts went through your head? And there's very little info that comes out. Like, we still don't really know why this happened to DeMar Hamlin, you know. And maybe it's just a freak thing, right? But Bronny James, I'm sure there wasn't contact like with Hamlin, you know, at that moment. And so I mean, is this a miss on, you know, the medical people? Is this a condition that maybe he had before? So many unanswered questions. What went through your head?
Honestly, the first thought that came to my head was I'm surprised that it didn't make bigger news quicker.
Yeah.
Because it had happened like the day prior to when it was first reported, which like, especially like you're talking about, I know he's not Wemby, but like Bronny is going to become a very big prospect just based, like, I hate to say it this way, but just based on his name.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, you're talking about like right now the all-time scorer in the NBA and his son.
Yeah.
And so honestly, I was like, wow, I was surprised. I was shocked when I first saw it. And now I wonder, kind of like what you said, like, what was the cause behind this? I've seen some people kind of saying, well, this might be the result of the COVID vaccine, which I don't know. Like, that's one of those things that you really don't know exactly unless like you're doing a study and everything like that. But either way, like, you're talking about an 18-year-old who, like, I mean, if he has the type of workout regimen that his dad has, is probably in like tip-top shape.
Yeah. Which makes it even more shocking. Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, like, and he was released from the hospital yesterday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So like, obviously we're praying that he continues to recover and he doesn't have any ill effects. But now I think one of the biggest questions is like, is he going to keep trying to play basketball? Because, like, I mean, not even just like is he physically able to do this? Is like, is this a risk going forward? But also, like, that's a big mental block. Like when DeMar Hamlin steps back on the field, like there's probably going to be that anxiety, that PTSD of like, the last time I was on the field, like, I almost died.
Right.
And sometimes that's really hard to overcome. Like, I'm not saying it like I have some kind of experience with that, but like, I can only imagine how hard it is to overcome something like that.
Yeah.
So definitely something to look out for, though.
Yeah, no question. And the funny part with and I heard the rumors with the vaccine and everything like that. We don't even know if he took the vaccine. You know what I mean? Like, LeBron is not saying, on that, and he's LeBron very guarded on his personal life, as he should be. I don't think we have a right to know about his personal life just because he's a public figure. I've always felt that way. But we hear the same thing like with Jamie Foxx. We don't know. He has, I mean, there's people that speculate, and we don't even know what happened to him. He hasn't even said, hey, I had a stroke, I had a heart attack, I had whatever. He just said he had a medical, emergency episode. So I don't understand the rumors on that. And because we just don't know. We don't know. I've been very open that I took the vaccine. We had your grandma was living with us at the time. That was my motivation, to protect her in her 90s. Last thing we wanted her was to get COVID, and I also, taking a job as a pastor, I'm around people a lot, and a lot of older people. And so, so I think we all had our own reasons but we also had our own reasons for not taking. And yeah, I think that it's so silly of people. It's even more sillier that people will listen to some of these conspiracy theories. Nobody knows, like you said, there's no study on that. But Bronny James, I agree with you, man. I don't know what that's like either, to get back on the court, or, after you've had that type of episode, or back on the football field. So you hope he's getting the help that he'll need at that young age. His future, I mean, is so bright. It's hard. I don't know how he steps in, from his dad's shadows anyway. I'm sure he's dealt with that, but a lot of eyes are going to be on him, even more eyes now, that this happened to him. So hopefully, as an 18-year-old, he's mentally equipped, to handle what's about to come, for him. And there's no doubt in my mind, unless the doctors say you shouldn't play ever again, that he's going to play again. So you just hope and pray that he's physically fit, that this was a fluke thing. Hopefully they get to the bottom of what caused it, but if they do and they want to keep it private, it's totally up to them. It's none of our business, and so, but I'm sure that his mom and dad are saying, listen, we could care less whether you ever play basketball another second. We want you alive, and so hopefully I'm sure they'll make all the right, decisions, on that. But what a scary thing there. Let's shift over to football. Because we talked a lot about Saquon Barkley last week. There was this whole also kind of summit, or not a summit. The summit's too strong of a word, but a call with a lot of the running backs in the league. And it was, had to do with why running backs are devalued in the NFL now, and why they're signing these, lower contracts. And I think, you see, the Dalvin Cooks and a few others get cut, pretty quickly. The Dallas running back, and then Saquon, he signed 1 year. Was it 11 million, Ken, or 10 million?
It's 10 million guaranteed, and then 11 million with incentives and whatnot.
With incentives. That seems low to me for one of the best running backs in the NFL. So the two-part question for you, and I'm sure the first part is, yes, you're happy, you're ecstatic. I'm sure he's there. But are there any ramifications now? Is the bond totally broken with him and the Giants? I mean, is there any chance that he resigns here next year? And overall, now, big picture with running backs, what were your thoughts when you heard about this, and how we've seen the running back position kind of get devalued over the years?
I'll start with Saquon. I think it's great that he's back. I think the Giants needed him back.
Yeah, no doubt.
And like we talked about it last week, but he can't hold out when he's 26 years old and is looking for a long-term deal. It never works out.
Yeah.
Long-term, maybe the Giants would sign him. They might have the cap space. I think they should continue to try to negotiate before we hit free agency next year, but who knows?
Yeah.
As far as long term for the running backs, who would you say right now is the best running back in the league?
I would have said the guy with the Colts, but he got hurt last year, Jonathan Taylor, right? I thought he was
Oh,
excellent. Dalvin Cook was it's weird that he got cut. He was great, I thought. I think Saquon's right there, had just an unbelievable year last year. Our guy with the Titans is I think Derrick Henry, combination of power and speed. He's been great. I probably put my eggs probably more on in his basket than anybody else. And if Jonathan Taylor from the Colts comes back strong this year, I'd say those guys. I'm probably missing somebody though.
well, let me give, because I have Jonathan Taylor. I also have Derrick Henry's contracts.
Yeah.
Like, two best quarterbacks or running backs in the league. Jonathan Taylor, 4-year, $7 million.
Wow.
Derrick Henry, 4-year, $50 million.
Wow.
So like both of those guys, yeah, they're the top of the league, but that's also right now the market. You look at the Chiefs. The Chiefs don't have a premier running back, and they've been to 3 Super Bowls in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
You look at teams like, it's like they never had like a top 5 running back.
Right.
Part of that's because they had Tom Brady, but I think you look at running backs, you can all point the finger and see Ezekiel Elliott having the big contract and really never panning out, and now he's also still unemployed, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, nobody has signed him yet. Yeah, yeah.
So I think like when you look at it from that bigger perspective, it's going to be hard for running backs to continue to grow that market. Because also like a lot of teams are starting to see running backs as much more disposable. I mean, look at the Bills. The Bills' best running back is probably Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Like they don't really have a running back.
Yeah.
The Ravens too with Lamar Jackson. Like,
yeah.
So I think it's going to be really hard, because especially now that a lot of the offense is more quarterback based. I mean, it's not that teams aren't willing to spend. You saw what Justin Herbert got.
Well, yeah, I wanted to talk about him and Jaylen Brown. I know 2 different sports, but we'll get to those guys in a second. So do you think that the running back position with a lot of teams these days is not nearly as important as it once was? Because there was a time where the running back was just as important as the wide receiver. I think the quarterback's always been at a different level.
Yeah, I would say it's not as valued at all. What's more valuable with running backs now is being able to catch from the backfield.
Yeah.
Which is why Saquon is good. But also, I think it's been a lot more devalued. Because, I mean, Derrick Henry has been excellent for the last, 3 or 4 years. What have the Titans done in the last 3 or 4 years? They made it to 1 AFC title game.
True, yeah.
But, you got guys like Patrick Mahomes who throw it in the air like crazy.
Yeah.
You got Joe Burrow, who's been excellent.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts, who's continued to emerge. And he's also got a massive contract in the offseason. So I don't know. It might just be that it's really hard for running backs to get any type of respect like that. Something that I saw that was interesting, though, is suggesting that running backs hit free agency sooner. Because also one of the biggest concerns with running backs is injuries.
Right.
Once you hit your late 20s, early 30s, they're worried that you're going to break down, you're going to slow down, you're not going to be able to block as much, and down you go.
Yeah, it's funny because the durability, and it's not that long ago. I can remember running backs that were great for 10 years or so. I mean, you look at Emmitt Smith, what a great career he had. And even around in that era, but maybe a little further in, Curtis Martin wasn't a big guy, never seemed to get hurt, was playing every year and was consistent every year. So I'm not sure what's happened there. Derrick Henry has stayed pretty durable for a little while now, especially the type of running back he is. And Jacobs, right, with the Raiders hasn't signed yet. And Cook, I'm surprised that nobody has signed him yet. He's going on like team after team after team. I don't know, man. I always thought if you had one really good running back who can carry the ball 10, 15 times a game, it just breaks the game up so much from just the pass, and it keeps the defense on their toes, right? So I don't, but you brought up such a great point with the Chiefs, how they've never really had in this run just a top tier running back. They've had a couple of really good ones, but that's not their focal point. They'll throw more to the tight end, obviously, one of the best ever. And into the wide receivers, or Mahomes will run himself, and that's been, I think, a little change too, because you see a lot of running plays even designed for quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson and Mahomes and Joe Burrow, where you never saw that before. Oh my gosh, the quarterback can, don't let him get out there because he's gonna get hurt, So I think this is a shift. And I don't know there's much that, whether they get on a call together or not, that they could do about it. That just this is the way the teams now are constructed. And I think ideally now coming out of college, if you can, catch, a pass in the flat out of the backfield and then, run another 10, 15 yards, that's probably more valuable than just taking a handoff these days. Yes?
Oh yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. So interesting. So Saquon, you said they should probably negotiate before the season ends. Is he even going to talk to them? Is he that bitter now, though? Or do you feel like he'll be open to coming back with the Giants as long as he gets paid?
I think he's open for it. Also, I think maybe talking with the other running backs, maybe seeing that, like, it really isn't that much that he could do.
Yeah.
It might also motivate him, but also who knows?
Yeah.
I think also with the running backs, it takes one dumb owner to change the market. That's what happened with Deshaun Watson. Like,
yeah,
the Haslams opening up the piggy bank for Deshaun Watson has completely blown up the quarterback market.
Well, now you have Justin Herbert, who we like. He's an excellent quarterback. He's really good. What has he won?
Has he won a single playoff game? Because I don't know if he has.
I don't think so. But yet now he's the highest paid. Did he get paid more than Lamar and Jalen Hurts? He's the highest paid quarterback now, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I mean, and so let's compare sports here for a second. I know, well, let's compare two players, because the NBA is going off the rails too. And listen, you and I as fans, I never worry about player salaries. I'm like, it is what it is. It's great. Let them, get paid. But there is a point where sometimes we scratch our heads. And Jaylen Brown, who we love, he's an excellent player. But if you were to sit down and name the top 10 players in the NBA, would Jaylen Brown be on your list like first time around? Probably not, right?
Nope. He's not the best player on his team.
Well, I was going to say, and he now is the highest paid player in the NBA. And so he's getting paid more than LeBron James, Steph Curry, Giannis. I mean, we can go on and on. Jokic, Luka, Jaylen Brown is getting. Listen, this is no shade on him, because there's a lot about his game. I would take him on the Knicks in a heartbeat. There's a lot about his game that I love, but Jason Tatum is a better player, and that's on his own team. And Herbert, I mean, if you were to name the top 5 quarterbacks, I don't think he'd be there. Maybe if you name the top 10, he's probably there, but he's the highest paid now. It just, I don't know where it ends, because we're going to see the same. Our jaws are going to be dropped, whether it's the Angels or the Dodgers or whoever, Seattle, whoever does sign Shohei in the offseason. That's going to set a whole new bar, Now, with him, I think we'll be able to say, man, he deserves it, because he's 2 players in one, and he's you can make an argument he's one of the best pitchers, if not the best, and certainly he's the best hitter, in baseball. But with these other guys, you can't, I can remember, maybe it was 10 years ago, Ken, you remember this when Mike Conley became the highest paid player in the NBA. And we were scratching our head. No shade on Mike Conley, an excellent guard. I don't know how many titles has he won. And I get it. Memphis at the time wanted to keep him. I totally get it, but I think that the Celtics, I think they could have paid Jalen a little bit less and still kept him. I know they wanted to keep him, and they kind of felt like they had no choice. And listen, the Chargers have no choice. They've built that whole team around Herbert, as they should. He's an excellent quarterback. He's not better than Joe Burrow. I don't think he's better than Jalen Hurts. I don't think he's better than Lamar. I could keep going.
Mahomes.
Mahomes. I mean, Mahomes was like probably sitting at home saying, he got what? Anyway. And so we'll close out. We'll get to some inspiration, but I have to ask you one last question. It's okay if you haven't, but I want you to for next week. Have you watched that series yet? Quarterback on
I started, but
okay.
didn't finish the first episode yet. I was doing other stuff, but
okay. I want you to watch that, and here's a couple of reasons why. It's about 3 quarterbacks. It's following the season, but it's really an inside look at Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, and Marcus Mariota. And so it's all 3 are very different, the stories that you're following. And obviously it's a little underlying, but you can see Kirk Cousins is really a faith story, because I think he's been very open about his faith. It's Netflix, so it's not as, and no knock on Netflix, but it's not as faith opening as I think he would have probably wanted it to be. Now I'm only 3 episodes in, and I think there's 8. So I'm going to keep watching it, but you'll enjoy it. It really is some good behind the scenes insight into how these guys prepare, into their personal lives a little bit. Mariota's story I'm appreciating, a lot more. And obviously his career has been a little bit of a disappointment because, Heisman Trophy winner and, national champion and things like that. I think we're expecting him to be a superstar in the NFL, and it hasn't panned out that way for him. So, all right. So you're going to watch it. All right. Ready for some inspiration?
Let's do it.
All right. I know you love stuff like this, and I know part of our audience loves it too. August 1st, 1972. I'm going to talk about a player real quick by the name of Nate Colbert. You probably have never heard that name. For about a 4 or 5 year period, he was one of the top sluggers in the National League. He was with the Padres when they were terrible as an expansion team. And in 72, he was still with the Padres. Cito Gaston was on that Padre team, a name you would probably know. And we talked about Clay Kirby before and the being taken out in the 8th inning of a no-hitter by his manager. I think that was in the summer of 72 or 71. But anyway, Nate Colbert. August 1st, 1972, the Padres are playing the Braves in a doubleheader. This is a record that still stands. By the way, that year, Nate Colbert had 38 homers and 111 RBIs for a dead last place team. So,
wow.
Yeah, he had a big year. He had probably about 4 or 5 years like that, and then he kind of fell off. I think he played only 10 years in the majors. I shouldn't say only, because that's a good run. But anyway, in this doubleheader, the Padres sweep the Braves. Nate Colbert in the doubleheader had not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 home runs in the doubleheader. And he had 12 RBIs in the doubleheader. Both are still records that stand today. And since there are not that many doubleheaders, they'll probably stand for a long time. And he had 22 total bases. That also is a record in that doubleheader. So that was great. But here's the ironic thing. The 5 homers tied a record set by Stan Musial back in May 2nd, 1954. He did that in St. Louis. And I'm forgetting the team. I had it written down, but I don't see it here that he did it against. And he had 11 RBIs. So Colbert broke, and I think he had 20 total bases. So Colbert broke both of those records, but he's tied for most homers in a doubleheader with 5, with Stan Musial. Here's the unusual part. Nate Colbert grew up in St. Louis, and he was a baseball fan. And as I think a 12, 13-year-old kid, he was at that game.
Wow.
And it's and when he crossed home plate, Bruce Froming was the home plate umpire. Crossed home plate, and he said, "I don't believe this." He said, "Can you believe what I just did?" And Bruce Froming said, "No, I don't believe it either." And when he went to the dugout, he started letting his teammates know, I broke Stan Musial's record. I was at that game, as a kid. And so that was just so unusual. It's one of those things that popped up, on these this week in baseball and stuff like that, websites. But the fact that he was at the game in 1954 and in 1972, he breaks that record. I thought that was just quite a God thing, how he sewed that. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's my inspiration today. Nate Colbert.
Wow. Well, I want to talk about a little inspiration, a little positivity around the longest tenured Yankee currently. Do you know who that is by any chance?
Huh. Let me take a guess here. No, I actually don't.
It's like a lot of people would probably assume Aaron Judge.
Yeah.
Which he'd signed after this guy. So actually the longest tenured Yankee, Kyle Higashioka.
Oh, wow. I would have never guessed that.
He's been with the team, I believe, since 2010. He hasn't been up at the majors for that long, but like he's been in the minors. And he has a very interesting story. I'm going to give kind of the quick snapshot of his career. He came up, like he was like an emerging AAA guy, like ready to be like the good defensive backup catcher for Gary Sanchez. It was kind of blocked when Austin Romine was there. Austin Romine then became a free agent, left, and he became the backup to Gary Sanchez. And like that's back when Gary Sanchez was an all-star doing great stuff and everything like that. So he was kind of there. And then when Garrett Cole came, he became Garrett Cole's personal catcher. Was kind of doing his thing. Then Gary Sanchez started to fall off. And Higashioka got a little bit more playing time, but then still was kind of splitting. He wasn't like the guy. And then Gary Sanchez gets traded for obviously Josh Donaldson, IKF, and Ben Rortvedt. Rortvedt was kind of supposed to be like the guy to split time with him, but Higashioka getting more time.
Yeah.
And then Rortvedt gets hurt in spring training. And then they get Jose Trevino, who becomes the number one guy and an all-star. So Higashioka has kind of just been the guy. However, he has caught the last 2 no-hitters for the Yankees. Back in 2021 with Corey Kluber.
Yeah.
And obviously this like last month with Domingo Germán's perfect game. And what's interesting is he had said like after the game, like, man, I kind of felt like a passenger through this whole perfect game journey. Just kind of like I was just kind of there for the ride. And normally, like when you say the phrase Yankee fans kind of like flooded social media, it's usually like fire Boone, fire Cashman. This guy stinks. You got to trade him. But here, the Yankee fans flooded the comments with love for Higashioka and how awesome he is, because he's one of like the top catchers when it comes to like pitch framing, calling games, things like that. Reason why he stuck around, and as a result, like he's done an excellent job, and obviously like the 2 no-hitter and perfect game. And so yes, a couple days afterwards, did an interview with him, kind of just like, you know how like Jimmy Kimmel, they do like the mean tweets, which sometimes are really funny. They did like a positive thing with him where they gave like a lot of like the awesome things that people had to say in like comment sections about Higashioka. So I thought it was really cool. Like social media sometimes can have such a a negative effect, but the Yankee fans were like, let's show love to the guy that is the longest tenured Yankee currently. So
wow. So off and on, mostly on, he's been with the Yankees 13 years.
Essentially, yeah.
Wow.
He's been with the organization for 13 years.
For 13.
In the minors for about 5 or 6 of those. But
Wow.
Yeah.
I would have never guessed that. He quietly does his job. He quietly is a really, really good defensive catcher. You see that all the time. He goes about his job. So that's great. I have one quick question. I don't want to take the spotlight off of Kyle there, but whatever happened to Austin Romine? Is he still in the majors?
I think he is.
Yeah.
Let me check.
But because I thought he was going to be the next big thing for the Yankees, and all I remember is him fighting Miguel Cabrera, huge, which Gary Sanchez went around punching people in the back of the head, which wasn't good.
Yeah, he's a free agent now. He last played last year with Cincinnati.
Wow. But Higashioka is I like him. That's a great story. All right. So much that we're gonna need to talk about next week. So you have homework. You're gonna watch the quarterback series, at least a few episodes, get a feel for it. We'll chat a little bit about that, but it's gonna be trade deadline. What do we look for these last 2 months in baseball? Lots to look forward to. Take us home there, sir.
All right, this is Kenny Squared N.
Kenny.
With Sports on the Positive Tip. We'll see you guys next time.
Absolutely.